Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics Monday on the IBM TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your host today, and we have a really great lineup today. And so we're going to start, without further ado, introducing some of these wonderful speakers. Let's start with one of my favorites. This gentleman is actually the co-author of The Millionaire Next Door and also co-author of Richer Than a Millionaire. Let's bring in Bill Danko. Bill Danko, welcome to the show. Good to have a richer than a millionaire person here. We're going to be talking about that today. Now I'm going to bring in as our number two person. This lady actually wrote a book, was a co-author of an incredibly famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Let's bring in Sharon Lechter. Sharon, welcome back to the show. Welcome to Economics Monday.
Hi,
Sharon, great to have you here. Now I got two of my favorite people on, because this, and you'll see later on, I have a big push for you guys into the systems of the United States. But we're going to bring in some other panelists. They're going to help us out, push the agenda forward, which is financial literacy. Let's bring in the former associate professor of the South Dakota School of Law, Dan Worthington. Dan, welcome back. Okay. And now to add more people to the show, like I said, it's going to be a full house today. He actually heads up IBM TV's Modern Investing, one of the favorite shows that we have here. Let's bring in Sasha Starr. Sasha, do sadanya. Welcome to the show from Canada. Okay. And then we have one of my other favorite gentlemen. He actually is in Utah because he fled from California. He's a tax partner with HVCVT, Holt, Hulse, Carlin, and Van Tryke, one of the fourth largest CPA firms in the state of California, one of the largest CPA firms in the United States. Let's bring in Blake Christian. Blake, welcome back to the show. I know usually you have like 30 minutes, so you show up, and then the Honorable, what happens is the former Comptroller General of the United States, David Walker, comes in right after you leave. It's kind of cute. Anyway, so David Walker will be here at 1:30 in about 30 minutes from now. And last but not least, from down under, we bring our billion-dollar hedge fund manager. Let's welcome from Australia, Shaquille Latmer. Shaquille, welcome to the show. Okay. Now, here's what we're talking about today on Economics Monday. You'll love this one. It's called this, for those who have gone to it. It's the Financial Education Literacy Commission, or Literacy Education Commission, out of Washington, D.C. I don't know if you're familiar with. Head up by the U.S. Treasury Department, okay? And their goal is to get financial literacy in America's education somewhere. So I actually attended the meeting, and this is the first time I attended. I kept threatening to go, but I wanted to go see what they had to say. All right. And I about died when I was listening to it. It wasn't, hey, Bill, Sharon, had nothing to do with financial education at all. Seriously. Okay. What it had to deal with is climate change and race relations. And the thing is, who was presenting it? Was it certified financial planners, CPAs like you, Sharon, or PhDs like Bill? No, there were a bunch of government employees that headed divisions talking about things that are important, like credit card debt. Did they talk anything about investing? Did they talk about real estate? Did they talk about investing in securities, what Sasha does, or investing in real estate like other people do? Nothing at all educational at all. So it just really griped me, because I've been a professor at Northeastern University's graduate tax program for 10 years now, and I teach the retirement planning class. And here's the reality of retirement planning. I never got that in high school. I don't know about you. You guys take retirement. I never had it in high school. I never had it in college, my BA degree. I didn't receive it in my MBA. I did not receive it in my law degree. Then when I received my master's in law and taxation, I took my first and only retirement planning class, which was an option to take it. You could get an LLM in tax and not take a retirement planning class. So what I did was this, interesting research, and you guys are all free to do it yourself. I went to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and University of Chicago, all very well-known academic institutions in the United States. I'm speaking for my friends in Canada and Australia down there, right? I went to their MBA curriculum and looked through their entire curriculum to see whether or not there was any retirement planning classes offered. And the answer was none, not one. So here's the reality of the situation. If you have an MBA from Harvard, Stanford, Yale, or the University of Chicago, you never took one retirement planning class. Now, Houston, we have a problem. So I'm going to move over to Bill Danko, since you wrote this book, and I read it back in 1984. This is after I got my LLM in tax. I wasn't even doing retirement planning. It was for estate planning purposes. I read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, and I was going, these people hit it right on the head. What are your thoughts about financial education in the United States? Why are we lacking it here, Bill? What's going on?
Well, why? I can't explain why, but we certainly are lacking it. That's for sure. Actually, in 1984, it's when Tom Stanley did that seminal piece called "Marketing to the Affluent," looking at it from the provider's perspective and how to sell and market to the affluent market. We turned it around in 1996 with A Millionaire Next Door, looking at it from the end user's perspective. And it seems that many of these end users are really from the school of hard knocks. They're entrepreneurs. They failed a lot, but they sometimes got lucky and made a lot of money and had a passion for what they were doing. And they just learned on the job. But all these other things, not everybody is an entrepreneur, of course, but so many other people are just trained to get a job and just plow through life with that job and hope everything works out by the time you get ready to retire. But there's not any planning that's being done. That's the real tragedy here. Okay.
Sharon, you wrote this great book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I just love the book. And when I look at, you were the brains behind the book, but Kiyosaki gets all the credit, but you're the CPA, you're the brains behind the book. But what's happening in the United States? Why isn't that book isn't taught in regular curriculum in the United States? This has been my big beef, that would be a great thing for students to learn in elementary school, middle school, and high school. What's going on here?
Well, thank you so much, Nick. And I think, if we could combine Bill's book with our book, I think we might make a huge impact. And I think we have for the adults that have read it. But it's really, you talk about the commission you went to. I was actually appointed to the first President's Advisory Council for Financial Literacy, which I think was the original iteration of the commission you're looking at. And I served both Bush and Obama. And you're right. I mean, there were 17, 18 of us. I was the only entrepreneur in the room. Most of them were government employees. And I was a very squeaky wheel about the need for personal finance and entrepreneur education. And I think, it's just really embarrassing the state of education that we have right now. There's only 6 states in the country that require a personal finance class for graduation. There are 15 others that require some sort of personal finance, but it's embedded in other classes, which means it's gotten, they get it from the, last few weeks of the class. So it's really not being taught. And if we really want to level the playing field for our children, give every child the equal opportunity to succeed, we will be teaching them about money in school. And it's just a tragedy that we're not. And it's really not the teachers. It's not the parents. The teachers recognize the need for this education. I'm down in the weeds with everybody. I'm actually the chairman for the Personal Finance Initiative for K through 12 in the state of Arizona, and have worked nationwide with the AICPA. And it really is, we end up getting frustration from school administrators and from the teachers unions. They just don't want to change anything. And it's something that we just have to create a grassroots initiative to say in demand that we have to teach our kids about money in school, because we're teaching them about condoms. We should be teaching them about money.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and now Blake, you went to USC and received a master's in taxation from the University of Southern California, okay? And you also have a CPA background. During your education process, maybe even at USC, did you ever even take a retirement planning class? That's my question.
Not specifically a retirement planning class, but we certainly covered multiple weeks of retirement planning. And I would even go back, one step further and say, we really need a basic budgeting class. How do you make money? What's your cash flow before you even get to the retirement side of the equation. And so I'd like to see more of that. I would like to point out, in addition to the excellent books that you've been talking about, but there is a website, the Financial Awareness Foundation. And it's a guy in California, but he has some really, really good content on there. And that's, it'd be a good platform for, an elective class, something after school. And I'd love to see the schools do something for not only the students, but the parents. They could do something in the evening when both the students and the parents could attend.
Mm-hmm. Dan Worthington, you were an associate dean at University of South Dakota School of Law, and you have an MBA, you have a JD, an LLM, and doctorate in education. Okay, you got all these degrees. Did you ever take a financial planning class or a retirement planning class, or were they even offered through your educational system?
Not in my graduate or undergraduate programs. Of course, I have taken numerous classes as a licensed professional. So, the irony is that you don't really get exposed to it. At least when I was younger, then you do get exposed to it, of course, when you're licensing and you need to learn all the material. And of course, I also do help people with their taxes and that kind of thing. So I have to know about it. But it's not generally taught. I got my LLM at University of Florida, another good tax program, and they do have a retirement course, trust mostly, for deferred comp mostly, but it's not because it's the way attorneys make money, right? But it really doesn't get into the weeds of the specifics of the various kinds of plans and the details of them, which is really, really unfortunate. Now, this information is readily available online now. So if anybody wants to know, they could certainly find it out pretty easily. But, it's not generally available. But I'm agreeing with the rest of the panelists that it's not just retirement planning that has to be discussed. It's essential economics and business financial discussions, including basic things like how to balance a checkbook and how to do the kinds of things that you need to do in everyday life. So it doesn't surprise you when all these people that give you all this free money called a credit card, you have to pay their own stuff back. And that when you take student debt loan money out, you have to pay it back because people are, especially younger people, can be financially illiterate, not experienced, don't have hands-on experience with the long-term consequences of financial decisions, and that kind of information needs to be provided at an early point to prevent them from creating a self-destructive environment for themselves for later on, because that not only hurts them, but it hurts our country by increasing the debt load in our country and sending the wrong kinds of messages about financial responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Sasha, you run Modern Investing show on the IBM TV network. You're a chess player, you're a top pianist, and it seems to me you gravitated from piano to chess to investing, and you found a true passion and love there. What made you more money? Was it piano, chess, or investing? What was the best for you financially?
Although I cherish my days as a professional pianist, and I was one of the top 3 in Toronto area, and I did cruise lines and concerts and so on. But the problem is that in my first year of investing, I made 5 times as much as I made playing piano. And I realized, since no one can play 5 pianos at the same time, only one. So I found that slowly my interest started to gravitate toward investments, and business generally, because I was director and CEO of at least two publicly traded companies on OTC, and at that time Vancouver Stock Exchange and so on. So basically, I still love music and I play every day, but not professionally, just for myself, for my friends, or so on. Now, speaking about the subject, what you're discussing, I totally agree that financial education, at least if it would be done on elective basis, so it would be available. The problem is that very few people, if you're talking about young students in schools or colleges, they have a lot of more important things in their mind, at least as they think. And if it's elective courses, I'm afraid not too many students will sign up for them. If you'll do it mandatory courses, it's also difficult to imagine how successful this program will be, to be on practical sort of level, I think. But I think the wealth of information indeed is available on internet. So people who are interested, there is abundance of resources that you can find appropriate information, and also somebody who really needs advice on practical level of financial planning and so on. There are a lot of advisors, financial planners that people probably can get access to and use their advice. What do you think?
Okay, Shaquille, you are a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund manager in Australia, so it's a different world for you out there. But you somehow got started in working in the finance area at a very early age. Tell us about that, or did you decide maybe it'd be better if you just read Shakespeare rather than getting involved in that? So how did that work for you?
Well, firstly, I always wanted to be rich. That was sort of what I wanted to do. So I actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was like 13, 14 years old. And it took a bit of effort to get the book because it wasn't exactly in my school library. But I read a lot of other books as well, like The Richest Man in Babylon, for example. And the problem with it was that at 13, 14, 15, it was that these plans might take 10 years or 15 or 20, and I wanted to be rich right now. So, I'd sort of come up with some various things that mostly failed, but I did actually make a lot of money before I turned 18. And when I was at school, I lost a lot of money too before I turned 18, but when I was at school, I did actually take business electives. So I learned how to write a check, for example, when I was in like year 9, not something that, you don't really use checks in Australia anymore, but it's not something that I think very many teenagers would even know how to do today. So you pick up a lot of information, I think, as you go, and you sort of work out where you think, what sort of investments do you think will work for you. So a lot of real estate investments, they talk about cash flow, and if it's geared towards Australian investments, a lot of Australians try to do a thing called negative gearing, which, unless you're in an extremely high income bracket and can afford to do that, it doesn't seem like that good an idea. But also I looked at it and went, well, actually, I'm not going to have access to the credit from the bank to even be able to get into property very easily. But I do have access to credit from the banks to invest in other things that I can structure in a similar way. And that's what really helped me to get to where I was. And technically speaking, as I said a few months ago, I am actually quite gainfully unemployed at the moment. That became official late last week. So, at 37, I don't have a job and I'm pretty happy. And I think that that's a nice feeling to have. I think also I might just say that having made a bit and lost a bit, at a very, very young age, there was a feeling that because it came so easy, I didn't have to try so hard, and I did actually take on a lot more risks. And that's something that in this decade of my life, as I'm heading towards 40 very, very fast, I'm obviously not prepared to take the same sorts of risks as a percentage of my net worth as I used to be even a couple of years ago. But one little story I will say, I'm not sure whose book I read it in, but it was about, making money not just from your own work. And I've told this story, if you'll just indulge me for a couple of minutes. I told this story once before. I was about 11 years old. I just moved to Sydney, and I noticed that one of my friends was a trolley boy, getting shopping carts, shopping trolleys, and taking them back to the grocery stores. And he was getting paid like $5 or $6 an hour doing that. So what I did was I came up with the great idea of getting all the 8-year-olds that we knew and getting them to do it. And we would only pay them $3 an hour. We'd pocket the rest of the money, and it worked really well. It was quite a nice little money spinner until the main contractor sort of shut us down and said this is not legal. So, but it was good while it lasted.
Yeah, that's called being an entrepreneur. There's no question about it.
And of course, I didn't have to pay any tax on it in the first place. It was perfect.
Sharon, I didn't know you were actually involved in trying to get the government to bring financial education to students. Okay, but the thing is, here's the way I see it, because this happened in the chess world also as well, which Sasha may know. Chess was not being taught in any of the schools. The United States Chess Federation decided to use outside vendors. In other words, and schools accepted them to come in and teach chess. Part of the reason why they had to go to outside vendors is the elementary, middle school, and high school teachers didn't know how to play chess. In other words, they had no clue what they were doing. I'm dead serious. So that's how chess in the schools got started. I'm looking at the same problem here in our education system. The teachers don't know anything. They're not certified financial planners. There's about 80,000 certified financial planners that we could unleash on our school system to teach financial planning. Bring in the outside vendors that have good courses and can steer children and in the right direction. What is the thoughts, if there is any thoughts, coming out of the government for using outside vendors to teach it? Because frankly, the educators don't know anything about it. What are your thoughts on that, Sharon?
Well, thanks, Nick. I think there's several complicating factors in that. Number one is the educational system is the purview of the states, and each state handles that separately. So the federal government tends to shy away from having any kind of an edict, even though I think it's very important to compel the states. I talked to them about using incentives for states to get on board to teach our kids about money. The second thing is, yes, many of the organizations, AICPA, certified financial planners, people stand ready to do it. The issue is the level of administration work. The state administrators and the local, some states like in Arizona, the actual control of the curriculum is at the individual county level, the state school district level, which is a further complication factor. And so the issue for what we've been driving is to try and keep it as simple as possible, to create those online programs that could be facilitated by teachers or facilitated by certified financial planners coming in, but that there's something that the administrators can see that's packaged that will meet their particular criteria, because not one state has the same criteria for personal finance. And we have, we're up to 7 states considered the gold standard that teach a separate personal finance class. And I really think other states should see what they're doing and duplicate it, because it's working. And that, that's in essence the problem of not invented here, right? Each state wants to control it, or each district wants to control it. But those complications keep us from being able to really move forward in a really smart and defined way to make sure the best quality education gets to our kids.
Bill, you years ago you did the book, like I said, Marketing the Affluent, and then The Millionaire Next Door, Now Richer Than a Millionaire. Okay, when you did your studies on this, were the rich people, the people that became millionaires, were they government employees or were they business owners? Who did you find in that group that dominated that group?
Well, right, dominated. Certainly there's a wide spectrum. You can make a lot of money in government, that's for sure. But yeah, mostly the entrepreneurial sort, those who built their own empires by maybe having a franchise, buy into a number of, Subway sandwich shops and McDonald's, and being in a machine shop and doing something that other people are not doing allows you to avoid a lot of competition and make some money. That's for certain. But getting to the point of there is a lot of material out there on cash flow analysis and checkbooks and credit cards and everything else. But there has to be the will to adopt this stuff into the curriculum. There is a lot of resistance to that. I've had an experience at a couple of high schools, giving an invited presentation. And I can tell you, most of these students could care less about what I was saying. And it was, disappointing that, I thought this is going to be a really nice, ripe group of, 17-year-olds who would want to hear this. And some did. But for the most part, they said, look, mom and dad take care of all the details. I don't have to worry about this. And until they get into the workplace and fly on their own, then they're going to have to start worrying about it. But there has to be that motivation to say,
and I'm motivated to bring in now the former Comptroller General of the United States of America, the Honorable David M. Walker. David, welcome to the show.
Good
David,
to be back with
there
you.
you are. Yes, good to have you here. Yeah. And David, we're actually talking today about financial literacy and the financial. They actually have a Financial Education Literacy Commission. They have to have things in Washington, D.C. I actually went to it. I kept threatening to go to it, but I finally went to it. And I was like dumbfounded, awestruck, and extremely disappointed in the presentation, because here was the presentation. A group of government employees talking about getting government jobs, and then they switched it to race relations and climate change and agendas. And I'm going, these people were not like what Sharon talks about in her book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. They weren't like what Bill Danko talks about in his book, The Millionaire Next Door, talking about how to become affluent in the United States. Instead, they ran to climate change, and they ran to race relations and how it affects your pocketbook, and they did nothing about entrepreneurship. Why? And these are the people that are supposed to lead the United States of America? What is wrong with Washington, D.C.? David, you live in there, so talk to us.
Well, for the record, I live outside the Beltway in Virginia. I live in the real world, not in Washington, D.C. All right. But look, I have been a long-time advocate of making it mandatory that in high school you have financial literacy and civic responsibility training. I believe that one of the reasons that our government is so dysfunctional with regard to financial matters, and one of the reasons that our democracy is not as healthy as it needs to be, is that people don't understand how to deal with their own finances, and they don't understand what their responsibilities are as a citizen in a republic. And as a result of that, that has not only harmed them, it has harmed the country. I think these two subjects are important enough that they need to be mandatory, not optional. And the reason that they're teaching these other things, it's because it's part of their political agenda. Mm-hmm. Their political agenda does not include these two fundamental things, which are essential for a healthy republic.
Yeah. And the thing is, the studies I read, David, is the average American in the event of a financial emergency can't get a hold of $400. There's got to be something wrong with our educational system from the elementary school onward to teach them about having reserves of at least $400 in the event of financial emergency. But my thinking, just going to, and I invite anybody who wants to because they have it online, go to that literacy commission, and I went away in shock and awe, but not in a positive manner. These are supposed to be our leaders, and they're failing. So how can the people in education, how can they possibly succeed?
Let me just say something about that, if I can. I think that a lot of people get the impression, especially young people, when they're taught that all the rich people are hoarding all the money. If we just had higher income taxes and we just distributed it to the poor, we'd be living in a utopia. They would have to form the impression that they can't get rich themselves. Now, I'm not sure who it was that you asked the question to. I think it was to Bill Danko before. about who the wealthiest people are, that he sort of knows when he was doing his research. In my personal experience, when I was a planner and when I was in that sort of space earlier on in my career, most of the people that came to me were not, in these really high-powered, high-paying jobs. They weren't all, high-paid lawyers and that sort of stuff, high-paid salespeople. These were people that actually just had normal jobs. And I tend to think that most people, if they, just have a normal job earning, an average wage, if they manage their money properly and start to put some investments into the various places, that they will actually end up ahead, and over their lifetime will actually earn enough to be able to replace their income with a passive income that will actually pay them. And the other thing that's really important if we're going to have the conversation about investments is, of course, the tax take. Because whatever tax rate you're on, if you're giving, let's say, a third of your money to the government in income taxes, anything that you can do to reduce that money that you're paying out in taxes and put it back in your pocket is inevitably going to lead to you being ahead of the game, especially when that's effectively going to compound over 10 or 15 or 20 years, or over 40 years if you actually start working for a company at 20 and retire at 60.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sharon, I'm going to get to you because you're involved in this, which I found very admirable. But what are the thoughts about, like I said, they did it in chess. They brought in outside people. They were actually members of the United States Chess Federation to teach chess to elementary kids. I was one of them, and I was shocked to see how excited the elementary kids were to learn chess. I thought I'd have 2 or 3 people show up, or 5 or 6. 60 kids showed up to the first day, and I had classes of like 60 people in an elementary school, and they could actually learn chess. Years ago, the thought was you can't teach chess to elementary kids. They don't have enough brain capacity to learn it. Now, when it comes to financial planning at a certain level, just like chess was at a certain level, don't the kids at elementary school have the mental capacity at least to learn the basics of financial planning? And if the teachers can't do it, why don't we go to the certified financial planners to do that, Sharon? And of course, it looks like you have that new book out, which I'd like to talk about also, Exit Rich. Okay, but let's talk about this right now.
Well, absolutely. I think, if kids know the difference between a $1 bill and a $20 bill at the age of 4, so they understand the spending power, they need to understand the earning power. So people say, I don't want my kids to learn about it too young. I think they're crazy, because that's exactly what they're learning is how to spend it, and the fact that mom and dad are limitless ATMs. But we've done exactly that in Arizona. My company has gone, and we actually bribed the schools. We paid the schools to let us come in and teach the kids in high school with a game that I created called Thrive Time for Teens. And we did a statewide initiative where the winners ended up with college scholarships. And that's the kind of initiative we need in every state. We need people that take it and say, we want to do this for the kids so that they get the information, the education that they need. Because I created this game called Thrive Time for Teens. It has a lot of humor in it, but it shows some real life examples of what happens to kids, and the fact that every decision they make with how they spend their money and their time either accelerate them to success or not. And it's so, our traditional school system teaches people to exchange time for money, right? Be an employee, exchange time for money. And we need to open their mind to the possibility of investing their time in creating, buying, or building assets. Most of them don't even know what an asset is. And those economic engines is what create financial foundations for themselves and their families, whether it be in retirement funds, or whether it be a business, or whether it be a real estate investment. And the sooner that I grew up in a entrepreneurial home, so it was normal to me. And I see most people don't get it. They have to exchange time for money. And the problem is there's only so many hours in the day and so many days in the week. And so as soon as these kids understand that they can go out and do things like what Shaquille did when he was a youngster, understand that they can create money. They can create things by adding value, solving problems, or serving needs. And that's the creative side of what we need to do in schools. So yes, if financial planners, but we have to take the bull by the horn and figure out how can we get in there to support these high school students or these elementary school, middle school, and get them to open their mind to the possibility.
David, Sharon was talking earlier about the federal government throws up their hands and says, well, it's not our problem. It's to the state, local government, even the school boards. Why is it in Washington, D.C.? I'm grateful that you live outside the Beltway, by the way. Okay. Why is it in Washington, D.C. there's like no conversation about financial education on a serious matter? Because I don't think that commission was very serious. Instead, we're talking about, should we spend 1.5 trillion or 3.5 trillion? It's all about spend, but nothing. And if they're going to spend money on education, they go, let's do this. We'll spend more money learning Shakespeare. Okay. Shakespeare is good, but it's entertainment. But let's not spend any money reading this book, The Intelligent Investor. So what is it with our education system that will throw lots of money into Shakespeare, but we ignore The Intelligent Investor? And the federal government's going, oh, we have nothing to do with this.
Well, first, you don't want to follow the example of the federal government when you're talking about finance because they're incompetent. Okay. Secondly, the education system is supposed to be run at the local level. There are many people that believe that the Department of Education shouldn't even exist. In my view, that's not the right answer. The answer is, if the federal government's going to be engaged here, it needs to be engaged in trying to look at what is in our national interest. What are things that need to be our national interest, and how can you encourage and potentially support financially state and local efforts to try to be able to build the skills and knowledge that we need in order to promote economic growth, entrepreneurial activity, and enhance our competitive posture globally. Unfortunately, that's not typically how they look at it. I mean, they're more throwing money at issues, including, quite frankly, on things like student loans, where we're subsidizing degrees, from universities that are marginal worth and degrees that aren't even marketable. And we don't do hardly anything with regard to the trades or entrepreneurial type endeavors. So look, don't rely on the federal government here. I mean, the federal government is not dealing with a lot of different issues. I do agree with Sharon that it needs to start at the local level. Interested parties need to be involved. I taught, as you know, at the U.S. Naval Academy, which are, let's just say, way above average students. In fact, for the last 2 years that I taught, we were rated #1 in the country for undergraduate education. And I would ask my students, even though I taught the economics and national security, I'd ask them, how many of you had any courses on financial literacy in high school? And I would guess that maybe 20% of them did. Mm-hmm. And so, I actually had, one of my sections of my course was basics of financial literacy. Okay. And they did have an elective that they could take if they wanted to learn more. But my view is that at the latest, it's high school. At the latest. Right. And the reason I say high school is it's not going to be long before they're going to be leaving the house, right? Either going to college or doing something else. And they're going to have to manage their own affairs at some point. So it's close enough to where they can actually potentially apply some of the concept that you're teaching them, is my view.
Mm-hmm. I think it's somewhat hard, especially in the United States, to expect a 17 or 18-year-old person who's just coming out of high school to be sensible about finances when they can see the government spending copious amounts more money than what they're taking in each year. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can imagine, I've never been married, but I can imagine what my wife would say to me if I said, hey, well, let's spend 200% of what we earned last year and just give it away to our children. I mean, I can imagine she wouldn't be too happy about that. But, we get these kids, we tell them to manage money properly, and then say, by the way, you should go and put yourself $200,000 or $300,000 in debt to try and work really, really hard, get yourself into an Ivy League college. And by the way, there's no guarantee of a job at the end of it. We have no idea whether you'll get a job at the end of it, but do be financially responsible. I think that we set our children up for failure. And I'm glad that I didn't go down that path. Thankfully, we have a slightly different system for tertiary education funding in this country. But I'm glad that I didn't go down that path because as I was going down the path of university in Australia, I realized that I could get the qualifications that I needed quicker and faster and went other ways of getting it. And was able to actually work while I was doing it and become a stockbroker and then sort of move up into hedge fund management and all the other things that I did during that time.
Sharon, you were co-author of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm curious, how many volumes did you sell when you sold Rich Dad, Poor Dad? How many books did you sell? Curious.
Well, Rich Dad Poor Dad was the first of 15 books that we wrote together over 10 years, and we sold.
Okay.
We're at about 35 million.
Okay. And you have a new book out. Can you tell us a little bit about your new book?
Yeah, Exit Rich. It's with Inc. Magazine, and it's when people start businesses, I ask them all the time, did you start your business to work until the day you die, or did you start your business to build something that was successful that you could potentially get your time back? And of course, everybody says B, but the vast majority of them do A, because they build a job, not a business. And so they don't build the fundamentals of the business that will help it not just be successful, but be sustainable and scalable, and yet also saleable. And whether you sell it to your employees or whether you give it to your kids, the issue is, are you building it appropriately so that it has the systems, the people, the processes, the intellectual property, the proprietary, building that asset valuation of the company. And so this is kind of the culmination of all the other 25 books I've written, and saying, here's the essence of what you need to do to build a strong, successful company. So whether you're starting a business or whether you're ready to sell it and exit, this book will give you those foundations. And my friend Steve Forbes says it's the gold mine for entrepreneurs, and I'm honored by that. So.
Yeah, a gold mine for entrepreneurs, which at the Financial Literacy Council, there was no entrepreneurs there. I mean, not one. And Bill Danko, when it comes to entrepreneurs and business owners, and you did studies on this. That's what you did in Dr. Tom Stanley. Was it a greater portion of the people that became millionaires? Were they business owners or were they employees, or what did you see when you did your study on that area?
No, clearly business owners was the greatest path. In fact, I think there's some data from the Statistics of Income Bulletin that, or the Survey of American Finances that comes out every 3 years, that those who are self-employed have 6 times greater net worth than those who work for somebody else. So it's, having that entrepreneurial spirit is really critical. There are some simple things, though, that everybody, if we can just teach some basic ideas of, work, save, invest, no matter what you do. I interviewed a veterinarian who took on a lot of debt going through veterinarian school. And, he says, I can only do so many procedures on so many animals in any time period. He goes, I got to get some more people. Now he has 20 veterinarians working for him. So here's a guy who is very skilled in what he does, but he knows that time is the limiting factor on how to build wealth. And so if he can have these, it's like Shaquille had, pay these other kids $2 an hour and I'll be charging $5 an hour. It sounds like a pyramid scheme, perhaps, but it's the idea of leveraging the time in a very proactive way. And I really applaud him. So it really doesn't matter what you do. I mean, you could be a veterinarian, you could be an auto mechanic, you can own franchises. But when you are limited with your own time, you're just not going to make it. You got to have the compounding of talent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, for the record, I don't recommend as a strategy to getting rich, breaching the child labour laws of your respective nations. But I will say, Bill, I think that for young people who are perhaps not quite sure how to start their own business, it does make sense to have a few jobs along the way, because of course you have the stability of a paycheck, and then you can actually have a look at maybe saving up enough to start your own business or to do something. But when you do actually look at starting your own business, it should always be okay, I can earn money by myself on my own work, but unless I'm employing other people, it's not really a pathway to great success unless I'm just exceptional and I become a lawyer or something like that. But the people that, in big law firms, to use that example, who actually get quite wealthy are often the principals and partners of the law firms, and then they have all the lawyers that work underneath them. So, that is one pathway, but that increases your net income, and that increases your disposable income. But you can't maintain that for very long, I don't think, unless you actually have outside investments that don't require so much management on your part.
Right. David Walker, why is it that we don't teach about people becoming entrepreneurs and owning and operating their own business. Unfortunately, when I did this, and that goes back 37 years ago, I had to read books on it because I was never taught about how to create your own company, how to hire people, how to lease retail space from offices, what CAM means, what CAM doesn't mean. I mean, there's a whole language in owning your own business. Unfortunately, the education system, in my experience, failed me completely doing that. I learned on the School of Hard Knocks dime. So, David, why is it that yet what Bill Denko said, 80% of the people that or more that are millionaires did it by becoming, they were self-employed? Why does the government have such an aversion to teaching people becoming self-employed?
Well, first, as we all know, most of the wealthiest people in this country make their. I'm not muted. As we all know, most of the wealthiest people in this country. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. You're good.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. As we all know, most of the wealthiest people in this country don't make their money through wages. They make it through assets and investments, if you will. And unfortunately, the current climate in Washington is they want more people dependent on government. And as we've said before, they're not even teaching the fundamentals with regard to financial literacy, much less the things that I would argue should be a complement to that, which is, entrepreneurial endeavors and some of the things that you need to know if you want to pursue that route, and including the fact that the people who are really wealthy in this country, they got wealth not through wages, they got wealth through owning assets and through investments.
David, I think you hit it right. I don't think that the government and big business are interested to educate majority of people in financial education, asset allocation, and anything else, because right now there is a shortage of workers available for hire. UPS, I know, FedEx, Walmart, they're all running to find people working. So if more and more people would be financially educated and would be able to allocate certain assets and be on their way to financial independence, how these companies and where would find workers to work, and hopefully for, if not minimum, but at least reasonable wages. Because right now, even if you're paying reasonable wages, it's very difficult. There is a great shortage of drivers and a lot of class of workers. So I think those people who really need to find financial education, if they need it, really, and they have desire to learn, it's abundance of that available on internet, you're right. And also they can always have access to financial planners. So it seems to me that it's not black and white situation why people in the United States are not getting financial education. Far from it.
Yes.
Well, let me just say, though, I find it really fascinating that people will look at, say something that Jamie Dimon says, or, something that the CEO of a big bank says, or the CEO of a big company, because we know that, one way to become wealthy is to get into politics, become very, very high up, and for some reason you seem to be able to acquire all sorts of assets. But I've never really read in any books that a good way of getting wealthy is to try to become a board director of a Fortune 500 company. Most people generally won't say that. So it depends on what you mean by wealthy, but I think most people are looking for that independence and multiple income streams that are more passively coming in. A lot of the people running our Fortune 500 companies, they are very good at what they do, but let's be honest, they're still an employee of a company. And the way that they run companies is not the same way that you'd want to run your own life, because they're much more focused on the next quarterly earnings report. They're much more focused on what's going to happen this year. They may not be on the board next year. So they're really focused on they pretend to be focused on shareholder value, but they're really focused on what's going to give them the best bonus structure personally. So I'm not sure that they're the right people to be looking at to work out how to make wealth for yourself.
Yeah, Sharon.
Yeah, this is not a United States solo issue. This is wherever, no matter where I go, no matter what address, people have no other language they speak. Their kids aren't being taught about money. So this is a global issue. And I think, yes, I am a huge advocate for entrepreneurship training, but the number one cause of employee frustration, stress, and absenteeism is financial stress. And so this is a global issue, whether you are an employee or your own business owner. Employees need to have the tools to understand how to manage their own money. And it's prudent for employers to bring that kind of education in, because there's going to the stats are in, the studies have been shown that if employers bring in financial education and help in retirement planning, help employees understand how to utilize the benefits that are available from the employer, that they will be more loyal, they will reduce absenteeism, and they'll be more productive. And so this is not just a entrepreneurship versus non-teaching. It's actual personal finance as well as entrepreneurship. And there's nothing that out there that says teaching personal finance creates a problem. It only helps and benefits individuals. And as whether you're an employer or a government or a state or a school district, if you want to add value to the people in your arena, whether it be your business or your state or your school system, teaching them personal finance is going to allow them to live more fruitful and more productive and less stressful lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it seems to me it's one of the least expensive things you can do to have the greatest return on investment, yet there's like no push behind getting it done. But you said, Sharon, that there's like 6 or 7 states that are now starting to require it.
Yeah,
but that still hasn't.
With the 7th one came online. 7 states require a separate personal finance class for high school graduation. Yeah. And 21 others require personal finance to be taught, but as part of other curriculum. So it actually doesn't get taught. It's one of those, we got to squeeze this in the last 3 days of the semester. So the value of that education is.
And that's what I have a really big problem with, because I know in like I say, even coming from chess world, it takes a long time to become a chess master. It's not like you're going to go in, you're going to read a book, and all of a sudden you're a master. It takes a long time, a long effort to become a master. To master finances, it takes a long time. The earlier you start somebody, the better chance they become a master of that. But that's not what we're doing. We're treating it like an afterthought. Yet finance discussions on finance negative is the #1 cause of divorce, single family homes out there, stress. In other words, it's the biggest problem that we have in the United States of America. It's the reason David Walker, when he talks about, hey, we're upside down in the government, they ignore it because they don't know what you're even talking about. It's because they were never taught that when they were in school. And that could be the biggest change in America if we just start bringing financial education. Frankly, the College for Financial Planning has a really good series of courses. It doesn't have to be that hard, because if you look at the tests, they're incredibly hard. But you could have courses like that brought into the schools that would actually make a difference, as opposed to let's pour more money into it so that I can teach more about. I pay my teachers more because they need to make more so they can teach Shakespeare, which Shakespeare is not as important as 0 to 1. By the way, good book, Peter Thiel. For those that read, I'm going to plug, even though he isn't here. There's only 2 people that reached chess master strength and became billionaires. He's one of them. He's also an attorney, and he also, let's see, what did he do? He started a company called PayPal. Did a good job. Okay. Read a book like this one, Richer Than a Millionaire. Oh, there's the author. He's right down there. And Sharon, I got to grab your book to do a plug on that also as well, because Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Exit Rich. That's what people should be reading. You can spend time with the Sicilian Flank Game. I've read this one too, but that's not going to make you rich. It may make you a better chess player, but it's not going to make you rich. Or even if it doesn't make you rich, at least makes you better off financially. Yet that whole area is like completely ignored. Instead, they're pushing critical race theory. That's like the big push, you know, where they're talking about let's do another year of Shakespeare. Come on, you know, what's wrong with this country? Yeah, you're in Canada.
Yes, yes, I would like to add something that financial education should start actually at home. The home education was actually the norm in 2 centuries ago in almost any country. Today, there's very little home education at all. However, in certain families, obviously, children have a privilege to learn from their parents at least something about financial planning, financial education. That's it's preferably, if possible, should start. And then, of course, it could add the financial education at school or colleges, and then use internet pages. Because if you don't have any financial education at home or any experience, then why would you go to internet to look for these pages? Probably you will not, and you will never look into it.
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah. Right. Getting the lessons at home is certainly critical. I agree with that. But, you know, I'm reminded with this discussion of the essay from Benjamin Franklin, The Way to Wealth from 1758. He wrote it under the pseudonym Richard Saunders. But in that essay, he says it's critical to oversee your own financial affairs. And as he goes through the essay and gives all sorts of good advice about, you know, being frugal and prudent and everything else, the very concluding paragraph was, everybody agreed with the sentiments that he articulated and then went on to practice the contrary. So we know what the answers are and what has to be done, but do the students have the will to actually change and say, yeah, I got to internalize this. I have to, you know, understand how to build wealth. The lessons are there, but are they willing to embrace it?
Well, starting at an early age makes a difference. They call it early childhood education, and I've even seen it in the chess world. Frankly, if you're not a master by the time you're 20, you're washed up. You will never. I'm serious. You will never become a grandmaster. If you try at 30, forget it. They've already done studies on it. And the same thing with acquiring assets. If you look at all the people that did well, they did much earlier. And so I'm totally believer in early childhood education. But unfortunately, in this area, and I'm talking about financial area, there's zero education. It's not even early childhood. There's zero, or as Sharon brought out, there's very little education. So with that, we're getting close to the hour, so we're going to have to adjourn. We do want to thank our special guests, the Honorable David M. Walker, Sharon Lecter, who wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Exit Rich, Dr. Dan Worthington, Dr. Bill Danko, Sasha Starr, and Shaquille Latmer. And we'll see you next week on Economics Monday on the IBM TV network. See you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah.